there was the idea, why not do something a little bit ridiculous? Hello, I'm Clara. Welcome back to the channel Ruffles and Steam. Two of the amazing costume sewists came up with the idea of, well, why not do something historical but with a wacky fabric? And I've had this lying around for ages, so the April Fool's Fabric Challenge is just perfect for me to do a little stash basting to get rid of this, well, weird fabric. I decided to do another Bustle dress, mainly because I might get a chance of wearing this with our steampunk expedition group. It will still be kind of tacky there, but you know, steampunk is fantasy. I'm mainly steampunk, so my focus is not on historical correctness. So I think I can get away with this fabric there and not just do it for the funsies, which would be okay too, but
do it for the pleasure.
You know, I prefer if I can actually wear stuff, and that's not that easy with huge bustle dresses anyway. As patterns, I will use Truly Victorian patterns from the 1880s, so from the late Bustle era. I've already made the Bustled Apron Overskirt and the Four-Gore Underskirt, so I'm quite confident I can do those. For the bodice, I will use a pattern that I've never used before. This is the Alexandra bodice, and since I've never made this means I need to make a mock-up. I hate making mock-ups. But you should always do that to make sure everything's fit. So yeah, this is where I'm gonna start. Oh, and yes, this is my no sewing room studio, so I'm super excited! This is the first project that I do here.
Before cutting your pattern, make sure to read the instructions and do all the calculations needed to find your right size, because I ended up needing two completely different sizes for my back and my front. In order to keep all the sizes of my pattern, I copy it with the thickest plastic cover I could find at the hardware store. Not only makes it copying super easy, because no, I'm not drawing directly on my pattern here.
See? Fooled you too.
It also makes placing on patterned fabric super easy.
Okay, so the mock-up is done. The back looks alright, even if the back is like 3 sizes smaller than the front, but that is what the pattern told me. But yeah, this will not work. I'm gonna try to make the darts a little bit smaller on the top and see if this will work.
Let the magic happen!
Okay, so I let out the darts, and now this closes just fine. You can see the overlap because the fabric is so thin. I will cut away a little bit here because there the overlap is a little bit too wide. But other than that, I'm very pleased with it.
I also added the changes to my pattern pieces.
I decided that the main part of the bodice will be the Leo print. This is going to be black, and the same black as the skirt. And this vest insert, I still have a bit of black lace fabric, which I hope will look nice. All these fabrics come from my favorite fabric store, where you can buy leftover fabrics, and this is also why you don't get, well, a lot of it. And now I just realized that the two black fabrics that I bought, well, this one is not black. It's very, very dark blue. So now I have to check if this here is enough for both the jacket and the underskirt. I hate myself right now. And of course, the shop is now closed and this was the last piece, so there is no getting more of this fabric. Piecing is period. I've pieced the fabric together. This is the upper part of the back of the skirt, so this will be hidden under the overskirt, so I just hope that this is enough because I don't have any more fabric of this and I will have to make the waistband out of another fabric too.
Back to the jacket. You can see here how the placement of the patterns is easier with see-through pattern pieces, and I also prefer using a rotary cutter because you can use it together with a ruler to get straight lines. Since the lace fabric for the vest is pretty see-through, it needed some facing, and I used the cheapest black cotton from IKEA for that, which I also used as interlining.
I spent the whole day cutting all the pieces out and now I'm flatlining the interlining to the outer fabric. Flatlining means that I put the layer of interlining flat with the wrong sides together on my fashion fabric and then just sew that flat together, and afterwards I will handle these two as one piece. I have so much of this Leo print that my lining will be this fabric too. So probably Leo Overkill and my sewing group is saying not happy about my fabric choice. Might be an understatement.
This cotton was disgusting.
It's awful.
But I'm gonna be the queen of tacky. Because I have my lining and my fashion fabric the same fabric. I wanted to show you why flatlining is important, because you can compare those two pieces. This one is not flatlined and this one is, and it's, even if it's just this thin cotton fabric that I use as interlining, you can already see it here that this has a lot more stand than this, so don't skip stuff. The part of interlining if the pattern calls for it, because it will make a hell of a difference, especially if you're doing something tight-fitting, if it's historical or not, because if you use interlining, the whole outfit will sit a lot smoother on your body than without interlining.
Another long night?
Today is assembly day. I prepared all the pieces yesterday and now I'm gonna try to put all those together. This is the first fitting with my fashion fabric, and as you can see, maybe here, this is way longer than this here. So yeah, I'm gonna open this seam again and have a look that the collar will go in at the same height as here, and also I have a little bit of excess here which I need to work on. And it's not that I laced my corset differently today. Alright, this is fixed now. I fixed the collar so it's now even here. I let out the darts a little bit more to have a little bit more room in the chest area, and I've added a tiny dart here so it doesn't bulge here anymore. And now I have to
make those changes to the lining too. And then I'm mostly done with the bodice. Spoiler!
When I was alive.
Welcome to day 4 of this sewing adventure where the weather is making it extra easy to stay inside. And yes, that is hail outside.
To be able to turn the points properly, I decided to cut away the interlining a little bit to have less material when I need to turn this. Cut away as much of the fabric as possible without cutting the seam, obviously. I decided to put in the collar a little bit differently than the pattern instruction calls for, which is to encase the collar between the lining and the outer fabric, but instead I decided to put in lining and outer fabric together and then put on the collar on top like this. So I will sew it from the inside, then fold over and sew this by hand, and I do that mainly to have this seam be encased in the collar and the other way around. And this is like really thick here, and when I do the collar like this, all of this seam can stand upright and doesn't have to be folded over, so it's a little bit less bulky, and the seam here gives the collar itself a little bit of extra stand. Does this make sense? I just think that it will look nicer in the end, and I don't have anything against a little bit of hand sewing, so this is the way I will do the collar now. Quite a few things happened today, other than the weather, which has been purely April weather. Even though you can't see it, this whole thing is now lined and sitting nice and snugly. I attached the collar, which you've seen me doing. I did that by hand, and I started putting the sleeves in, but as you can see, when I move my arm, the elbow does not sit where the elbow of the pattern is sitting, and they are really wide. I'm pretty sure this is not how it's supposed to be, so I will probably take them out again and make them a little bit slimmer. And also you can see that the fabric is pulling. I might have made a mistake when setting the sleeves in. You know, you should never set in sleeves when you are tired. I call that a day, and we'll tackle the sleeves tomorrow. The only thing that I will do now is unpick that seam so I can start fresh tomorrow.
A new day will come.
To fix my problem with the arms, I unpicked the sleeve and went back to the original pattern, and I noticed that all the size adjustments are made to the back seam of both pieces, so I thought maybe I could just sew around here and make this thing smaller, but then I don't know where the pattern pieces are supposed to meet here, because on the circle here there also needs to be some adjustments. And since I want to make this whole thing really nice, I'm gonna do the whole work and unpick everything, and then I will also adjust my copied pattern pieces. This is the new sleeve, and even though it's not perfect, you can still see that the elbow is not perfect in the placement, but it's way better than before. It's sitting better. I think it could be even slimmer, but this is as good as it gets. Yeah, I'm fine with how it is. Gonna put in the second one. Then I need closure. This is like a really bold strip of black, even though the textures are different. I decided that I want to do a row of buttons and have the fabric be repeated here. The button press was one of my first pandemic purchases, and I want to give you a quick show of how it works. I'm using my embossing or die cut machine to make fabric circles out of the Leopard, as well as smaller ones out of the interlining fabric. Those are put into the mold of the machine together with a little metal cap. I make sure all fabric edges are folded to the middle so they won't stick out later. I place the back of the button with a wire loop in the lower part of the machine and then put the mold on top. Now it's pressing time, and it's done. Since there is a little color grade in the fabric, I tried to mirror that in the buttons. I really like the placement of the buttons on this Bustle jacket, so I will use those as a guide. That's quite good. Now let's have a look how many buttons I will need. 20 buttons will go on this. Well, I'm lucky I made exactly 20 buttons. I'm so glad I'm not going for historical accurate, because these are old buttonhole scissors that I found on a flea market, and as you can see there's a hole here, so I can cut like this and not cut the fabric in front, and when I cut this I will stop at the end of the buttonhole like this, and now I will unscrew this little thing here to make sure I cannot cut any longer than the next buttonhole. I have to admit that I'm not entirely sure why this is shaped like this, but the back side is also sharpened, and I use it to go into the buttonhole and then cut the last bit of the hole. I'm not sure if this is the purpose of this being sharp, so if anybody knows,
I guess it's a mystery.
Please tell me in the comments down below. For the boning, I cut fabric strips on the straight grain to put on the inside on top of the lining, instead of sandwiching the boning between lining and fabric like the instruction says. Mainly because I want to be able to easily remove the bones before tossing the jacket in the washing machine. And this being a cheap project, I also use zip ties as bones. I'll give you a total cost rundown at the end of this video. Now onto the skirts. The outer fabric that I chose for my skirt is really flimsy, so I'm gonna make use of this dark blue instead of black fabric and use it as a lining, because I don't really need dark blue. I realized that the fabric is really stretchy this way, but not so much in this way. I will put the pieces lengthwise, because that way the weight of the skirt won't pull it that much down. That means that I have to do even more piecing, but it's on the inside, I don't really care. To avoid folds due to different stretchiness, I sew lining and fabric together only at the top seam, hang them for a bit and let the fabric weight pull everything down. Since my skirt pieces will be left hanging for several hours, I now have time to work on the Bustle Apron Overskirt. Since I have quite a lot of fabric of this left, I want to go all ruffles everywhere. It's been a while since I've made this, because this was one of the very first kind of
historical Victorian things I made. So I hope this will work out, but apron overskirts are usually quite forgiving. On to cutting. Since the fabric has these stripes, I want one of them to be right in front of the middle of this apron. So this might seem like a waste of fabric, but you know, I want to get rid of this, so I don't really care and I will cut it like this. I've been testing how this fabric drapes, and I think that single layer fabric might not be enough for a nice drape. I will be lining this too. I've got the feeling that this project is the piecing project of death, because obviously my lining fabric is not enough for lining this whole Bustle apron. Yeah, piecing it is again. When I copied that pattern to paper, I forgot to mark where the darts should go, so I tried to just add some, but I think they are too close to the side because this pleat can't go further than this because here is the dart, so I might have to move the dart a little bit more to the middle. Proof that I cannot be trusted with the darts because... Oops. Yeah. Where's the seam ripper? I changed the darts again, so they now fall in a position that I like, and I also reduced the width of this whole front panel. I also started putting the waistband in. I only put it in on one side, so it needs to be folded over and sewn down, which I will do by hand, but since the back also needs the tapes to pull up the puffs, I didn't do that yet, so I can sew that into the waistband. What I will do now is find the tapes I will use, and then I want to add a ruffle all the way around the edge here and also in the front, because why not? And I still have quite a bit of this fabric, and since I want to get rid of that, that seems like a good idea. For the ruffle, I'm gonna use those tiny dotted parts of the fabric, and I found that using a quilter's ruler like this one is the easiest way to cut stripes for ruffles. I'm honestly never going back to cutting those by hand, or rather with scissors.
Another little helper I'm quite fond of is the rolling hem foot. And I recently saw this little trick for the start of the machine rolling hem, where you sew a few centimeters and then use the yarn tail to thread the fabric into the foot. Works like a charm.
Since we're not doing historical accurate, I'm making good use of my serger for making the ruffles. So I'm turning everything up. Because then magically ruffles appear, which I only have to sew on to my skirt. Now it's time to put in the puffs by adding tape to the waistband and have this on the inside, obviously. Gather this one up. And to make it easier to iron the skirt once it's wrinkly, I always put buttons on the tape and then buttonholes in the fabric so I can unbutton that whenever I need it.
Since I cannot reach the buttonhole with my buttonhole scissors, I'm using the seam ripper method this time.
What I'm doing now is folding the tape, the place where the button needs to go, and quickly basting that down, because this will reinforce the place where I will sew on the button on the tape.
one thing that is really important, and that is taping. So I have tape attached at this point, which I will now also tape in place at the same side here. And now see happening is the apron is pulling in place, and now we have the pleats in front. To have a little bit less of this whole area of leopard, I'm gonna add this lace, which I also used for the jacket to have repeating design elements. The lace will also help the ruffle staying flat, because when I will sew this onto here, it will fix this seam flat. This also helps structure the whole thing a little bit. The overskirt is finished.
Wait, what is that?
Well... I forgot a needle in the blanket, which I now need to get out somehow. Oopsie. There it is.
Now we really are done.
So now I will make the last piece of the outfit, the underskirt, and this has been sitting here for 2 days, which is longer than I hoped I would need for this, but yeah. I will now flatline those together. Instead of basting to prevent the 2 layers from shifting, I just pinned them together, starting from the top middle and working down and to the sides before overlocking them together on the edges, and then put the whole skirt together. I don't have a long enough strip of fabric for a whole waistband, so I need to put 2 together, and if you don't want too much bulk on one place, you can join these 2 pieces, put them diagonally. I'm sure they overlap a little bit, because this will give you the point where you need to sew. So I'm gonna sew from this edge to this edge. If we unfold this now, this is a nice strip. And if we now fold this over, those seam edges are not on each other like this, so it will lie flatter in the waist and not create extra bulk there. Lady Stryon has shown me that I should take all the length of the skirt that I can get, so for the lower seam I will use this ribbon. I will sew it on from the outside like this, and then I can fold it over, because I do it like this, there will be no seam on the outside. By doing it like this, I can encase the serger seam and also enforce this by only losing this much of the seam. I have to admit that I didn't film more of the making of the underskirt, but I kept it pretty plain and simple anyway, because I wanted to be done and have this project finished within April.
It's done!
And I'm mostly satisfied with how it turned out. There are some minor issues that I would work on next time, like the slimming down of the apron might have been a mistake, because I should just have pulled it a little bit more to the back with the tape, because I also think that the overskirt does not sit quite right in the back. I'm definitely gonna use that pattern again. And if I learned one thing from this project, it's piecing is not that hard, and it's not that bad either. Thank you
for staying with me until here. If you want to know how much this costs, stay with me till the end. If you liked what I did, please subscribe. If you have any comments on this outfit, on this style of editing, because this was like my biggest project so far. If you have any questions on the patterns that I worked with or on the general sewing hacks that I've used, if you know what that weird little thing on the buttonhole scissors is, please let me know. Use the comment section as much as you like. If you want to see more of what I do, which is mostly steampunk, fantasy, historical inspired photo outfit stuff, you can find me on all the platforms under Ruffles and Steam. Well, and now I can tell you how much this beauty cost. Okay, now listen, I paid no more than 20 euros. Believe it or not, the fabrics alone were only about 10 euro, and everything else combined, like the buttons, the zip ties, the lace, the yarn, I mostly had those already at home and I estimated how much I paid for that, so this was a super cheap, well, and trashy project. But remember, if you want to sell something, it's your work time that is worth more. And I tell you, I worked a lot of hours on this, more than I want to admit, but since you heard me saying the 1st of April was yesterday at the beginning of the video, and this video comes out at the very end of April, you can guess how much time it took. Now I just need another occasion to wear this, because spooking muggles at the park is nice, but you know, not quite satisfying.